It's time now for Johnny Dollar. Bob Bailey in the intriguing adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
And now, Act One of yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Special Investigator Johnny Dollar, Hartford, Connecticut, and my account of the Southern Sleuths matter. The phone rang on my desk, a jarring sound in the stillness of my office. I picked up, the smell of stale coffee clinging to the air. Dollar here.
Mr. Dollar, we need your help. Our jewels, they're gone. Stolen.
Now, ma'am, start from the beginning. I grabbed my notepad, scribbling down the details. Her name was Mrs. Evelyn Blackwood, and she was calling from a small town just outside of Baton Rouge. A town I'd never heard of, but then again, I'd never been one for Southern hospitality. The humidity alone was enough to keep me away, but something about the desperation in Mrs. Blackwood's voice drew me in. Maybe it was the way she choked back a sob as she described the missing jewels, her grandmother's pearls, a ruby ring passed down for generations. Heirlooms, all gone. I knew the feeling. That sense of violation, of history ripped away. I'm on my way, Mrs. Blackwood, don't you worry. I arrived in Louisiana later that afternoon. It was a quick flight from Hartford to Baton Rouge. I picked up my rental, a small beige sedan that had been recently smoked in. I made my way out of town. I followed twisting, poorly maintained roads into the lush bayou country. As I arrived, the Blackwood mansion loomed large, a monument to old money and Southern charm. Spanish moss dripped from the ancient oaks that lined the driveway, casting eerie shadows in the afternoon sun. I stepped out of my rental car, immediately hit by a wall of heat and the scent of magnolias. I caught a glimpse of a young woman peering out of a third-story window, barely visible through the sheer curtains.
Mr. Dollar, thank goodness you're here.
Mrs. Evelyn, thin and frail in stature, met me on the front lawn. Clutching a crooked, twisted cane, she ushered me inside. Her hand trembled on my arm as we reached the doorway of her huge antebellum home. The house was the epitome of Southern elegance, but an air of unease hung heavy in the air.
I've called the local police, but... well, they don't seem to be taking this as seriously as I'd hoped. Didn't you hear? Don't you understand? The police are doing nothing. Mr. Dollar! Mr. Dollar!
Her lips pressed tight. She grew increasingly impatient. She crossed her arms. I didn't hear her. I was too lost in thought as I gazed at the walls filled with long tapestries, early 18th century oil paintings, and other priceless works. My only thought, why were these items untouched? A voice, elegant and laced with a soft Southern drawl, cut through the tension.
Well, sugar, that's where we come in, Cher. I'm a psychic detective. When we heard about this high-value theft, we just had to help sweet Mrs. Evelyn. Ain't that right, Smitty?
A woman with icy blue ghost-like eyes, long curly locks, all curves and confidence, sashayed into the half-lit doorway. Her emerald green dress shimmered, a stark contrast to the pale walls of the mansion. A cascade of gold and turquoise bangles adorned her wrists, each one sparkling with enough diamonds to make a king jealous. This was Cody Coco, and she was clearly a woman who appreciated the finer things in life. She glanced over her shoulder and gave a slight nod to someone just out of view.
Cody here has a nose for these things, a sixth sense, if you will, a spiritual gift.
A new voice interjected. This time a man's. An older man dressed like a knockoff Johnny Depp stepped forward and emerged from behind Cody. Under his fedora, he had a curly mop of sandy graying hair, a boyish grin behind rose-tinted glasses, a twinkle in his eye that spoke of mischief and intelligence in equal measure. He extended a hand.
Name's Smitty. Smitty Travels. It's a pleasure to meet me.
Dollar. Johnny Dollar. The two of us had walked out onto a rocking chair-lined porch. There must have been 20 or more. So, what brings you here, Smitty? Looking up from his cocktail, Smitty gestured towards the driveway, as if clueless or unwilling to answer my question directly. A sleek green Plymouth Roadrunner gleamed in the sunlight, its lines as sharp as a razor.
He's my baby, Mr. Dollar. How can you go wrong with a car called Charmed?
I walked out with Smitty for a closer look. It appeared quick as a bullet, and proved twice as loud. Smitty leaned against the door, reached in, and turned the key. He patted the hood of the car with an almost reverent air.
And trust me, like most of the local women here, he's plenty fast. Savvy.
I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. This Smitty was an enigma, a contradiction in terms, and if nothing else, pretty full of himself. A southern playboy with a muscle car and a belief he and Ms. Coco can solve crimes through the supernatural. Interesting. I feel like this whole scene was a distraction. One, to either take me away from my investigation, or two, allow Ms. Coco time alone to chat up Mrs. Evelyn. I'll have to keep my eyes on these two.
And now, Act Two of yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Mrs. Blackwood called us back inside. She led us into her parlor, the air thick with the scent of lilies and old money. As she recounted the details of the robbery, a new figure entered the room. Samantha Smith, tall and imposing, with a no-nonsense air about her that some may mistake as being unapproachable. Her long, stunning, fiery red hair and piercing blue eyes gave her a commanding presence. As she made her way across the room, she lit a cigarette, took a quick drag, and then crushed it under her feet into the antique rug that sprawled across the parlor. It really tied the room together.
Mr. Dollar, Samantha is a dear friend. I made her acquaintance through a Write a Deployed Soldier program. She was a wonderful pen pal, and we have remained close. I've finally convinced her to come stay on the grounds and relax. She and my niece only arrived a few days ago.
So, she was visiting for the first time the night of the robbery. So, Samantha, firstly, thank you for your service. I'm curious, what did you do?
Thank you, and it's just Sam. I was in the Army. As an air traffic controller, I deployed to Iraq twice and then Afghanistan. I have worked on and been in charge of every piece of tactical ATC equipment the Army utilizes. I am certified in all areas of fixed-base ATC and held every leadership role within my MOS. I recently retired as a sergeant first class, and I'm still getting used to civilian life.
Her voice was clipped, precise, direct, and deliberate. I could tell she was a woman used to taking charge, and obviously well respected in her field.
I traveled a lot for work, wrote a lot of policy. Security systems, airports, layouts, and routines. 20 years active duty, you pick up a thing or two.
I could see the wheels turning in her head. And a stickler for detail, Sam was already analyzing the situation, scanning the room with her eyes for clues that we might have missed. With Samantha, Sam, on board, I had a feeling this case was about to get a whole lot more interesting. The Blackwood mansion was a maze of hallways and hidden rooms. One could get lost or remain undetected easily. I started my investigation in the master suite where the robbery had taken place. The room was in disarray, furniture overturned, clothing scattered across the floor. The only sign of the thieves was a shattered window overlooking the gardens. It was the perfect entry point, discreet and easily accessible.
Such exquisite taste.
Cody, true to her nature, gravitated towards the empty jewelry box, her fingers trailing over the velvet lining.
Spirits of the swamp, give me a sign. Guide my hands. Reveal.
She leaned over and picked up a single loose pearl, its luster dulled by the dust. She rolled it between her fingers, then gave it a gentle brush against her teeth.
It's a fake. A thief with an eye for quality that knew to leave this behind. That's a rare breed. We're not dealing with amateurs.
I'm not sure what I just witnessed, or what to believe. Meanwhile, Smitty had disappeared into the garden. I decided to join him. I could use the air. I found him crouched by the shattered window, humming a Beatles tune as he examined the ground. He was on all fours, hovering his right hand just above the surface. Semicircles. Then he'd repeat. Contacting spirits. He abruptly stops and reaches. That's a magic show. Did you find something?
Looks like our thief dropped something personal. And there's no magic.
He grinned, holding up a small metal detector and an even smaller silver object. It was a single cufflink, engraved with a distinctive crest. A family crest, perhaps. This was our first real lead. We gathered back in the parlor, our findings spread out on the table like pieces of a macabre puzzle. The cufflink was the key.
I know this family crest. The family, it has one bad egg. Once a notorious art thief known as the Sparrow.
He was known for his meticulous planning of his heists and his uncanny ability to blend in with high society.
The Sparrow, huh?
Big fish for a small pond like this.
What's a fancy pants thief like him doing hitting a place like this? Doesn't track.
I had to agree. The Sparrow usually targeted museums and art galleries, not private residences. Something didn't add up. While I pondered this new development, Smitty tapped his fingers on the table, a thoughtful frown on his face.
There's something else. The way those jewels were taken. It was too clean, too precise, almost like someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Someone with insider information.
His words hung in the air, heavy with suspicion. Cody's eyes narrowed. She had been unusually quiet, her gaze darting between us as if following a silent conversation.
You know, there's this charity gala happening tomorrow, big to do. Folks from all over the state will be there. All the major buyers and sellers will be attending.
Flashing their jewels like it's going out of style.
And the Blackwood pearls would be the crown jewel of any collection. A cold realization washed over me. The Sparrow wasn't the mastermind behind this heist. He was a pawn, a distraction. The real thief was someone closer to home. Someone who knew about the gala. Someone who knew about the Blackwood security system. Someone who had access to the house. My gaze swept over the faces gathered around the table. Mrs. Blackwood, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. Samantha, her expression unreadable. And then there was Smitty, his brow furrowed in concentration as he tapped away at his laptop, the glow of the screen reflecting in his eyes. We were dealing with a wolf in sheep's clothing, and it was up to us to unmask them before they could strike again. The next evening, the charity gala was in full swing, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and champagne wishes. Guests mingled beneath the glittering chandeliers, their jewels sparkling under the soft lights. It was the perfect setting for a heist, and we were ready. We had set a trap, using the Blackwood pearls as bait. Cody, adorned in a stunning ruby-red gown that showcased her curves to perfection, was playing the part of the socialite, her every move watched by hidden cameras. Samantha, her sharp eyes missing nothing, blended in with the crowd, a silent sentinel. And Smitty, well, he was in his element, charming the ladies with his boyish grin and quick wit, all the while keeping a close eye on the exits. As the night wore on, I felt a growing sense of unease. The Sparrow, as I expected, was a no-show, which meant our real thief was still out there, lurking in the shadows. And then, just as I was beginning to doubt my instincts, I saw her. A dark-haired young woman, her back to me, slipping through a side door, her movements swift and deliberate. In her hand, a small velvet pouch. The Blackwood pearls. I called out to Sam, my voice sharp as I pointed. She didn't hesitate. She pounced. With the reflexes of a seasoned professional, she intercepted the woman, her grip like a steel trap. The woman struggled, but it was futile. Samantha had her pinned. The young woman's face was contorted in a mixture of rage and despair as she was led away. It was Mrs. Blackwood's niece. Her face now stripped of its mask of innocence, revealing the cunning manipulator beneath. She had been the mastermind all along, using the Sparrow as a smokescreen while she planned her own heist. As the police led her away, Samantha turned to me, a satisfied smirk playing on her lips.
Told you I knew security. Once a soldier, always a soldier. She never stood a chance.
The case was closed. The pearls and jewelry were recovered. A successful collaboration. As I watched the sun rise over the Mississippi, casting long shadows over the bayou, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The world was full of wolves in sheep's clothing, and I had a feeling this wouldn't be the last time I crossed paths with one.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Here's our star to tell you about next week's story.
Next week, a string of holdups, and behind them all is... Well, why don't you listen, find out for yourself. Join us, won't you?
Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and be sure to turn on the notification bell. This has been Johnny Dollar on Smitty Travels.